Okay, right. So our first speaker is going to be Duncan Jones from Marine Discovery, who does a lot of the number crunching for us on what's going on with our cetaceans down here. Unfortunately, he couldn't be with us tonight, so he's a bit gutted not to be here, but he's pre-recorded his talk. So this is the longest talk for tonight. It's about 20 minutes, but that gives an overview of, like I said, sightings and trends in cetaceans. Duncan has done a fantastic job for us. So I'm going to share that movie to start with. Dan, maybe you could just sort of unmute and let me know it's all working properly when I do that, because like I said, I won't be able to see anything from my end. My computer's gone into slow mode as well. Right, try again. Okay. Can you see that okay?
Yes, I can see that.
Okay, and as I start playing it, if you could give me a thumbs up just to let me know, I can hear the sound. Why is that not playing? Well, that's a good start. Worked when I was trying it earlier. I will just try that again. Sorry, folks.
My name's Duncan Jones, and I am a partner.
So, Dan, is that working?
Yeah, I can hear that. That'll help.
Great. Okay.
Good evening. My name's Duncan Jones, and I am a partner running Marine Discovery Penzance, and also a research associate at Exeter University. First of all, I'd like to apologise for not being there this evening. Sad to miss it. It looks like there's a great evening of talks lined up, and I'm definitely going to be catching up by watching on YouTube. I'm going to be talking about changing seas, cetacean sightings in southwest waters in 2025. So this really is my usual update that I do every year on what's been going on with cetaceans in waters of the southwest of the UK. As I have done previously, I'm going to be focusing on 3 different data sets, although I will include information from ad hoc incidental sightings that we have heard about as well. So first of all, we have the data from Organisation Cetacea. So this is a charity that has trained observers on cruise ships and ferries, and you can see their data coverage is pretty wide, spatially across the whole southwest, and the data sets from 2011 to 2025. In the top right, we have the data from the survey effort from Sequest Southwest. So this is Cornwall Wildlife Trust's Sequest project, and they have trained observers observing from different points around the coastline. And this is a very coastal data set. Then in the bottom right, you've got my data set from Mounts Bay that I collect during my tours. So again, this is 2011 to 2025, but it's really spatially quite constrained, but gives us a strong idea of what's going on in Mounts Bay. So I'll be considering sightings trends for the main cetacean species that we see, or those that we have enough data for to look at the trends. And for each species, there'll be 2 plots. So the top plot is a scale plot showing trends in sightings. So these are not exact figures because the data sets are very different. So if we try and compare sightings per hour in the 3 different data sets, they don't really fit on the same plot very tidily. So I scaled them between 0 and 1 so that we can compare trends in the plots successfully. And then there's a second plot, bottom right, showing the seasonality of sightings. So the whole year is 100% of sightings, and then each month is the percentage that month contributes to the total of the 100% for the whole year. So it gives us an idea of seasonal peaks in sightings. So this shows harbour porpoises. And first of all, trend-wise, you'll notice that in both the SeaQuest data in green and the Orca data shown in gold, that there's really in the last few years been a drop-off in sightings of harbour porpoises in those data sets, whereas in my data set for Mounts Bay, we seem to have a continued increase. So both the SeaQuest and the Marine Discovery data show a peak in around 2017 and then 2019 in the SeaQuest data, but they've diverged since then. And then the Orca data shows, really a drop-off since 2022. The Orca data is typically more offshore or more offshore biased, whereas the other two data sets are inshore biased. Now, Jess is going to be talking about harbour porpoises specifically, and she's looked at the SeaQuest data in much more detail. So I'm not going to say too much about the porpoise trends and what these sightings mean. We can see in the seasonality-wise, porpoise sightings in Mounts Bay definitely peak between July and into autumn, whereas in both the Orca and the SeaQuest data sets, both two very different data sets, they seem to peak in the winter. So possibly Mounts Bay is an important spot in that late summer and autumn, and we see mating behaviour like in the photo here, calves and really high number aggregations. So it could be that Mounts Bay is a bit of an anomalous hotspot, and that's why we have this continued peak within our data. My main research focus for the past 15 years really has been investigating how tidal processes influence cetacean distribution. I've been particularly looking at harbour porpoises. And I just included this slide to make a suggestion about why there might be differences in the SeaQuest data set and the Marine Discovery data set. So what this shows is the time of, it's actually slack water just before the flood tide in Mounts Bay. And the data on the left is 2011 to 2018, and the data on the right is 2011 to 2025. So that's my latest models we've been running. And you can see there's a bit of an offshore movement between the two different maps. And this could mean that because of a shift in porpoise distribution, the coastal observers aren't detecting them as readily, particularly if we're having higher sea states, which we've been seeing a lot of over the last few summers when porpoises might be around. So this could go in some way explain why the SeaQuest data has shown a drop-off and the Marine Discovery data hasn't. We also could be seeing displacement due to common dolphins and things like that as well. So I just wanted to include that as one idea of why there might be differences. But it'd be really interesting to see what Jess has to say, and I'll be watching the webinar on YouTube to see her talk. So common dolphins have been really interesting in the last few years. Well, certainly since 2015, we've seen, or apparently seen, an increase in numbers in coastal waters, and both the Marine Discovery dataset and the SeaQuest dataset support this, as does really the Orca dataset, because their records seem to show almost a flat trend, so there's not an increase or decrease, and then a bit of a decrease since 2023, so suggesting not really a population increase across the whole of the southwest region, but an increase in sightings in shallower or more coastal waters, so maybe a coastward shift. And both the Marine Discovery and the SeaQuest dataset suggest a trend of more sightings in the summer months, so really between June and September, whereas actually the Orca dataset has more data for the either end of the year. So maybe there is some kind of inshore-offshore movement in the summer. I've been wanting to look into the organisation's Cetacea dataset in a bit more detail for the last few years, and this year I've finally done it. So I requested their data for the whole of the Bay of Biscay, and I wanted to see if we can pick up a spatial trend or movement in their data. So what I did was, first of all, I've mapped their effort and sightings for 2011 to 2014 on the left-hand side, and then calculated a kernel density plot for where their highest sighting rates are. And we can see at this time, really they're focused off the northern coast of Spain, so off that continental shelf edge of Santander, and just to the west of the Cap Breton Trench. And then I did the same for 2015 to 2025, and we can see there's a bit of a change. So while there are still high sightings rates running down through Biscay, there's a real focus to the west of Brittany and up into the English Channel, suggesting a movement in distribution. There's also an increase off the northwest coast of Spain, of Galicia, and that possibly we can see that their survey effort has changed as well. So that's going to be having a bit of an influence. Interestingly, if we look at the 2015 to 2025 data and we focus really from July onwards, so to encompass that summer peak, that or that summer trend that we see in coastal distribution in southwest waters, we can see that the hotspots or the kernel density plots of higher sightings rates really do focus north of Brittany and around that Breton coast and in southwest waters. So it seems that we can see those spatial trends that the temporal trend, we can spatially see the temporal trends detected in both the marine discovery and the sequest data. So why might common dolphin distribution be changing? Well, the answer to that question is that question is probably not that easy to answer. And there's probably a number of factors influencing their distribution. But what we are seeing is there is a correlation between this spatial change in common dolphin distribution and the spatial change in croupiid species, so things like pilchards and anchovies. And so it's likely that common dolphin distribution is shifting in relation to their prey distribution. And these animals are going to follow their food. And actually, croupiids are the only fish species increasing in abundance in southwest water, or the only commercial fish stock increasing in abundance in southwest waters. The rest are all in decline. Common dolphins also feed on horse mackerel, and various other things as well. And we know the croupiid distribution in the Bay of Biscay is potentially moving due to nutrient availability and the impact this is having on plankton structure. And the plot on the right is taken from last year's report, and it's from the plankton section. It actually shows the decline of Calanus hygrolandicus, a type of copepod in the southwest. And actually that's a reason why we're not seeing basking sharks anymore, because that's probably what they were feeding on when they were here. We can see a real drop-off in that. And what that's indicative of is a change in our plankton structure. So Calanus hygrolandicus typically would feed on something like a coccolithophore, and that's a phytoplankton of microscopic plant life. So you get coccolithophore, Calanus hygrolandicus, and then a basking shark would feed on that, or a fish would feed on that, and you've got energy passing very quickly through the trophic levels of the plankton layers into the food chain, and that's a more high energy system, and that would support larger species. But what we're now seeing is that the base of the food chain is more dominated by cyanobacteria, a much less nutritious phytoplankton, and then we have multiple layers of zooplankton before we get to fish. So the energy has got to pass through multiple layers of zooplankton, and each layer you get less energy passing through. So we're moving into a more low energy plankton structure. And that's actually supporting the croupiids better and some of the other fish not so well. And that's possibly why we have this big influx of common dolphins, but it's also affecting other species as well. However, this hasn't been fully or properly investigated. These are just correlations we're drawing and assumptions we're making. So we need further investigation to better understand what's going on. Moving on to bottlenose dolphins. So in both the sequest data and the marine discovery data, we've had a real decline in records of what we used to call our inshore pod, or our semi-resident inshore pod of bottlenose dolphins. They were sometimes known as the Cornish bottlenose dolphins, and then they became known as the southwest bottlenose dolphins, and now they're described as the south coast bottlenose dolphins. So we're potentially seeing a movement of these further and further east up the channel. But there's some dispute about why they are disappearing in the records. Is it because their population is small and so they're struggling for viability? So are they going to disappear like the west coast community of orcas? We don't really know, but we're definitely seeing less of them. Sightings seasonally tend to peak in both the marine discovery and the wildlife the sequest data set at the start and end of the year, whereas there's a summer peak in the orca data set. And so as well as the coastal or the inshore bottlenose dolphins, we also record offshore bottlenose dolphins. So it's biologically the same species, but really different ecologies. They don't mix, and these offshore pods are much bigger, much larger, and they also cause a lot of fluctuation in the sightings trends, because if you detect a few pods of these a few times in a year, there are real large numbers in the pod, so it really skews the data. But we're definitely seeing more of them and less of the coastal bottlenose dolphins. Rebecca Dudley is going to be talking about the South Coast Cetacean Consortium, and which used to be the South Coast Bottlenose Consortium. So she can maybe talk more about the bottlenose dolphins a bit later on. Risso's dolphins have definitely been really interesting in the last few years. So we've been recording them more and more frequently, with years where we've had stronger peaks in sightings and years where we've had less sightings. And we certainly their presence coincided with cuttlefish spawning. So Risso's dolphins are cephalopod feeders. They like to feed on cuttlefish, octopus, and squid. And primarily in southwest waters, we were recording them feeding on cuttlefish, and their presence coincided with cuttlefish coming inshore to spawn. And traditionally, off the southwest, cuttlefish have a 2-year spawning cycle, so we were seeing peaks and troughs across years, and that affected our sightings trends. But as water temperatures increase, cuttlefish life cycles shorten, and they lay a higher number of smaller eggs, so there are more of them. So possibly with warming waters, we started to see Risso's dolphins more consistently year on year. And then last year there was a real big change because we had this big octopus bloom, and Risso's dolphins were recorded feeding more readily on octopus, on octopus and cuttlefish throughout the year. And the octopus are present in larger numbers for a larger portion of the year. So we're definitely seeing temporal and spatial expansion of Risso's dolphin sightings, and it was a real bumper year last year across the southwest for Risso's dolphins. So where their seasonality used to really peak and coincide with cuttlefish spawning, now certainly in the coastal data sets, well, last year it was more year-round. That hasn't really been picked up in the seasonality because the signal is cancelled out by the multiple years of data. In the orca data, they tend to detect more in the winter. So this is a map produced by Josh Symes, who's currently studying, well, he's one of our employees at Marine Discovery, but he's currently studying his Master's in Marine Vertebrate Ecology at Exeter, and he's investigating Risso's dolphin sightings around the southwest. And so on this map that he's produced here, the blue dots represent all sightings up to 2024, and then the red dots show 2025 sightings. And you can really see this potential range expansion and the fact that there were a lot more sightings of Rissos in 2025. So it's really interesting, and the results of his master's project are going to be really interesting. So we're awaiting them with bated breath. So previously I did a habitat model, well, with help of Ellie Cappy, did a habitat model study for Risso's dolphins in Mounts Bay, and we found that, unsurprisingly, their distribution was really focused around the eelgrass beds in the inner part of the bay for the main part of their sightings. But then out of cuttlefish spawning, these offshore features where you can see the red blobs around offshore features were more important. It'll be really interesting to include the 2025 data and see how much the octopus have changed this distribution. The other thing we found while we were looking at this was that in the winter, the orca surveys detect Risso's dolphins across the Herds Deep, which is the centre of the overwintering location for cuttlefish, so that the Rissos were actually tracking cuttlefish out into the channel, some of them out into the channel in the winter months and feeding out there, and then shifting inshore to forage or to feed on cuttlefish in the summer. So minke whales are another really interesting one, and the rates of sightings of those in coastal waters have been increasing, while in the data set which has more, so the orca data set, sighting rates declining, although the sequest rate has shown a bit of a decline since a peak in 2022. We haven't picked this up in the Marine Discovery data, although it's plateaued a little bit. Possibly, again, higher sea states can make these guys really hard to detect. They're quite sneaky little minkies. So in the sequest data, it'll be really interesting to look into the impacts of sea state on the likelihood of detection, for example. In all the data sets, the sightings of minke whales seem to peak in southwest waters in the summer months. There are also anecdotal records of increases in minke whale sightings as well. And now moving on to fin whales, we see again an increase in all the data sets apart from the orca one. But these increases are a bit more delayed, they're a bit later in time than some of the other data sets, although we've got some really anomalous high peaks in sightings in certain years. And I didn't say on the last slide, but this seasonality plot is actually includes minkies and fin whales. So the fin whales are the dashed lines and the minke whales are the solid lines. But we've seen this increase in fin whales in coastal waters. You can see this one here, southwest of southeast of Mousel, really quite close to the shore, where we'd expect to see fin whales, that great tall column of glow, giving it away. So yeah, like the common dolphins, I decided to try and plot spatially what's been going on with fin whales within the orca data set, to see if we can notice any change. And again, we've got this increased effort across the years. However, we definitely can see suggestions of distribution changes, not quite as marked as with the common dolphins, but it's quite interesting again that they start off being focused along that northern shelf edge off northern Spain, 2011 to 2014. And as we go into 2015 to 2025 data set, that expands, and the new survey routes off Galicia seem to detect populations there as well. And if we split that down into summer, we start to see an increase as we go further north in Biscay, and then in around the Celtic Deeps off the North Cornish coast and southwest of Wales there. And then hidden under all the effort between Britain and France, there's actually another blue blob there that develops in this data set. So there's definitely a suggestion of a coastward shift, of a northern shift and possibly a coastward shift. It's nowhere near as extreme as we see in the with the common dolphins. The data sets I've used haven't covered all cetacean records by any means off the southwest, and there are definitely higher anecdotal sightings of fin whales and minke whales than there ever have been, and certainly common dolphins and rissos as well. And I guess that supports what all these data sets underlie that and show the trends in a robust way. There are also other cetaceans recorded. So, for example, last year in July, there were some orcas recorded off the Isles of Scilly, photographed off the Isles of Scilly by Joe Pender, and they were identified as being Freya and the companion from the Vegapod. So that's part of the Iberian populations. And Sarah Matthews did the identifying of them. She's from Dolphin Zone. She's going to be talking about dolphins a bit later. Dan is going to be doing a talk on humpbacks later, so I'm not going to include them in this as well. Also, orca surveys, so we've been looking at their data. They also detect white-beaked dolphins, Atlantic white-sided dolphins, striped dolphins, northern bottlenose whales, orcas, and they had really interesting a possible Brewer's whale in their last year's data. So Brewer's would typically be considered a more subtropical species, but with changing conditions, it's increasingly likely that we're going to see them further north and even up into our coastal waters. So they're one to learn the identification features of, because they can look very much like a sei whale or a minke and be tricky to tell apart. So yeah, we need to be watching out for other species as well. But none of these species are recorded in high enough numbers to be recorded in these data set trends. It just wouldn't work, but they are out there. Final thing to say really is thank you for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed the talk and it's been useful and given you some new information. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Once again, sorry I can't be there. You can either contact me at info@marinediscovery.co.uk or dejones11 at exeter.ac.uk. But yeah, thanks for listening. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Oh, yeah. Thanks to Duncan there for a very thorough look into the data for recent years. Right, so without further ado, I shall pass over to our next speakers. It's going to be Dan and Briar, I believe, talking about humpbacks. Dan, do you want me to share the presentation, or are you going to share it?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind sharing that, would be good. Thanks, Beth.
Okay, I shall do that. Hold on. Likewise, I might be able to see the screen on if I'm showing PowerPoint, so I might be able to monitor the chat. Okay, hold on. Okay, can we see that all right?
Yeah, I can see that. Thanks, Beth. Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. My name's Dan. If you know me already, then you'll know that I'm usually with my British Divers Marine Life Rescue hat on. But tonight it's very much more a Cornwall Wildlife Trust hat, as this is something else to do in my spare time, which is the humpback whale identification catalogue in the southwest UK region. And tonight I'm joined by Briar, who's based over in the Isles of Scilly, who's just going to be helping me cover a little bit more about what's going on over there, because she's based there. She knows a lot more about it than what I do. She gets to see these animals a lot more and has a lot more know-how with all the local sightings and what's going on. So this is a double act this evening. Next slide, please, Bex. Just to introduce ourselves as a project, we're the Southwest UK Humpback Whale Catalogue, hosted by Cornwall Wildlife Trust. We started back in 2021 with the great encouragement of Bob Earl, who you might have spotted earlier on at the beginning of the webinar here tonight. And that was because we were starting to get not only a great increase in the number of humpback whale sightings around the region, but also some animals that are starting to be re-sighted, even if it was just one day to the next in the same area. And this is where that project came out from. Under the Southwest Marine Ecosystems umbrella, this is where we started doing annual reporting on what's happening with the humpbacks. So as I say, we're hosted by Cornwall Wildlife Trust. I do this as a volunteer for the Sequest Southwest Sightings Project. And we've been collecting videos and sightings sent in by Sequest Southwest surveyors, because quite a few of them do manage to get out and spot a lot of these animals on routine surveys or ad hoc sightings that they make when they're out and about, as well as members of the public. And we're quite often picking up social media posts where people have got photos that could be quite fun as well. We've also researched historical records, so we've managed to pick up a number going back all the way into the early 2000s as well. And our catalogue overall now has 34 animals in it currently, with over 190 confirmed re-identifications. Next slide, then, Beck. So when it comes to identifying the animals, we typically use unique markings. I always put the slide in because there is a bit of a widely held misconception that you can only identify a humpback whale from the underside of its tail. That is not true. You can do it from any part of its body, because they all have uniquely shaped dorsal fins, pectoral fins, and scars and markings on all parts of their body. So this really is part of an appeal that I'll come back to later on, that if you do see anyone posting photos of videos of humpback whales, if it doesn't show the underside of the glutes, that doesn't mean it's not impossible to. That doesn't mean it's impossible to identify. So if anyone out there does have pictures, if they're historical from decades ago, I'd be very, very happy to receive them. As you can see on these slides here, or on the photo comparisons here, hopefully you can see on the far right hand side, we've got the different coloured rings coming up on the two pictures. So we can see this is the same whale, because the corresponding colour ring matches from the top photo to the bottom. And then with the dorsal fin picture, again, you can see the same on the left hand picture. So there's a few rings that pop up on there as well. So we're looking at a few things. There's unique scars. This is one of our best known animals called Pi. And hopefully you can see in the top dorsal fin picture, the red ring shows the pi mathematical symbol from this animal gets its name. Wow, so we can step on to the next slide again on that back, thank you. So I'm going to hand over to Brian now, and she's going to tell us more about pi. Right, over to you if you'd like to unmute, please, Brian.
Hello, can everybody hear me okay? I don't know how well I can be heard. I think people were struggling to hear you, Dan. Your sound is quite muffled.
I can hear you okay anyway, Brian.
Fab. Okay, thank you. So Pi, I think probably a lot of you have heard of Pi already. She's probably the celebrity humpback whale of the UK. She was first identified in August in 2019 in Mounts Bay by Rupert Kirkwood, and she was originally called Cream Tea, but that didn't stick. She's also been sighted on the south and west coast of Ireland, and she's recorded in the Orca Island and Irish Whale and Dolphin Group catalogues, as well as Lindsay McNeil's Scottish Humpback ID catalogue, and where Pi was seen in the Outer Hebrides as well. So Lindsay's done loads of work matching those animals. And then in winter 2020, on Christmas Eve, Pi was first photographed in the Isles of Scilly, and she's been back every winter since, except 21, 22. She originally started off kind of around the Garrison, so the southwest coast and the southern coast of the Isles of St Mary's. But last year she was off the northeast coast of St Martin's a lot more. We don't know if that's because she was there more or if that's because the St Martin's residents set up a whale watching WhatsApp group, which might have been the cause of the increased sightings. And then in early January of this year, we were able to send off some photographs that were captured by Brendan White of Pi's underbelly when she was scratching on a rock. So we sent them off to Ted Cheeseman from Happy Whale, Evan Johns Grace Russell, Guy Estrella, and they were all able to help us confirm that Pi is in fact a female. And so in 2025, we had 7 sightings of her in January, 1 in February, and then the following winter, 2 in November and December. She arrived October in 2024. She got here early, and November 2025 she arrived a bit early, which is a slight change in the trend because normally she wouldn't arrive until until December. And then if we could move on to Poland, please. So Holland was first photographed in December 2024 in the Isles of Scilly. Well, as far as we knew at the time, we sent the photographs off to other catalogues and no one could make a match, but I have since found them in the Irish Whale and Dolphin Group online catalogue, and in that catalogue they are HBIRL 132, and they were photographed on August 2024 in Dingle Bay. Interestingly, that's a location that Pi has been photographed off the coast of Ireland too. Holland was first photographed off the northeast coast of St Martin's, but in 2025 was seen kind of inside the islands more, in between Sampson and St Mary's. And Archie Moore was able to get some drone photographs of Pi and Holland swimming side by side. It's not from the video pictured in the slides, but another one which we were able to send off to the Irish Whale and Dolphin Group. I'm going to try to make sure I've got his name pronounced well. Miguel Basquez Iabaz did some photogrammetry for us and was able to measure Pi at approximately 11 meters and Holland at 7.6. So that would have made Holland approximately a year old and Pi either a young adult or a sub-adult. But unfortunately, we weren't able to get more footage of them side by side to confirm that. And both of the animals have been seen in the same location on a couple of times, quite closely interacting. So yeah, that's those two from the Isles of Scilly. So back over to Dan.
Thank you, Brian. That was great. I've turned off my camera, so hopefully my audio might be a bit better now. So looking back on last year on the mainland side over in Cornwall, we had Minstrel, who originally was identified in December 2023 in Monkey Bay, and then had multiple sightings of this animal between then through till March 2024, primarily again in Monkey Bay, also in St Ives Bay, and then towards the end actually around in Mounts Bay on the south coast. And interestingly, this animal was reported on several occasions with a number, in similar locations to another animal called Ivy, who was around at similar times and similar locations, but they were never actually seen at the same time in the same place. So when Minstrel was in Newquay, Ivy was in St Ives Bay, And then at one point, they actually completely swapped places and were in the other location. And then, like I say, towards the end, both of them ended up actually moving around to Mounts Bay, but again, in different parts of it. So quite likely those two animals were in contact throughout their whole time while they were here, which is quite interesting to know, even though we never actually saw them directly together. Now, what was really exciting about minstrel in 2025 was that this was the first animal on the Cornwall side that we've actually managed to re-identify coming back in a different season. So being seen in 2023 to 2024, and then again 24 to 25 winters. So that was very exciting. So that's our first confirmed return to Cornish waters or mainland waters that we're aware of. Next slide, please, Sue. And then we have the infamous surf rider, who was first spotted around New Year by Ian Boren, who's one of the amazing SeaQuest volunteers who sees loads and loads of amazing things around Newquay Bay and elsewhere around the Cornish coast, and seems to be incredibly fortuitous with his luck in finding and seeing some amazing cetacean sites. So this animal here, he actually named Surf Rider as well. So as he was the first one to see this animal and get photo ID and give it open the opportunity to name it. Little did we know, actually, soon after, as you can see in the top photo by Andy Rogers, hopefully you can actually make up Surf Rider genuinely is riding around at Watergate Bay. So Surf Rider is our famous animal that was around for about a month off Watergate Bay on around Newquay Bay, regularly very close to shore, maybe sometimes within 100 metres of the beach, and very, very visible, attracting thousands of visitors from across the country to come and see. So a hugely popular animal that gains lots and lots of attention amongst the public and on social media especially, also a little bit in the media too. So as a fantastic ambassador for marine conservation and wildlife species as well, because so many people were able to go and see this animal quite readily and become engaged and infused and educated about marine wildlife issues and conservation too. Unfortunately, we have no idea if this animal came back this year. I've got to say that winter 2025-26 was very, very slim pickings. So we were incredibly blessed the previous winter to have a number of whales around, certainly Surf Rider and sometimes Kai and Holan over at the Isles of Scilly, who were very, very visible. This year just hasn't been anywhere like it. We've had, as far as I'm aware, 3 humpback whale sightings around Cornwall, none of whom we got identification pictures for. So this winter really has been quite fair in terms of humpback whale activity here, unfortunately. But that's not to say that they weren't here completely. They may have been further offshore. Maybe they were just somewhere slightly different, perhaps over in Ireland or Wales or Northwest France, for example. They might not have been too far away, but obviously without the photos to confirm that, we're not quite sure. Next slide again, please, Beck. Then the only other animal that we had during 2025, so it wasn't this winter, but the previous winter, this animal was named Mo, named by Bex Allen, actually. This one was seen down in Newquay Bay and was added to the catalogue. It's had this really unique fin shape. So it's not quite as proper fin as we might think of it, but it was almost like a double peak or a bit of a bump. So whether actually a slice might have been taken out from the boat, how I don't know. But this is one of the better photos that we have of this animal. And it was feeding with either a minke or a fin whale nearby. So that's all we know about the man. Next slide again, please. So what have we found out so far about the humpback whales that we have been getting around here? Well, as we mentioned earlier, sightings increased significantly since 2020. It's for a combination of reasons that we're still sort of investigating, really. It could be prey distribution shift, as Duncan alluded to in his talk just now. There might be more impacts from climate change. There is also the recovery of the population since the times of whaling and since it was banned mostly around the world since the mid-1980s as well. So population recovery certainly is in the mix, and that's a good news conservation story, which is nice to hear. There might be other factors involved that we're not yet aware of, but hopefully what we find in the future with some more research is some more confirmation of the reasons for it. They do seem to be using some specific habitats around here, so a lot of sightings do come from, as Brian said, around certain parts of the Isles of Scilly, from St Ives Bay and around Land's End to Mounts Bay, and also up towards North Bay as well. But we have also had sightings in other parts around the coast quite occasionally. But those ones seem to be the ones that we're getting most sightings from at the moment. They are spending a lot of time feeding here as well. That seems to be the primary reason for them being around here. We largely don't know much about their age and gender breakdown, although Brian has done some really great work to get a little bit of information that we do know out of the animals over what the Isles of Scilly in the last couple of winters. That's something that we're hoping to improve in the future. And we know from connections with other catalogues elsewhere that we have links from southwest UK area to Ireland, to Wales, the Isle of Man in Scotland, plus 2 breeding grounds, which hopefully you can see in the larger scale map down in Cape Verde, the west coast of Africa, and the Dominican Republic over in the Caribbean, and also one animal up in an Arctic feeding ground of Rocha as well. So we have 2 animals confirmed visiting the region here in different seasons and years. Pi, of course, visiting very regularly, almost every single year, and then some minstrel as well for those 2 years, hopefully coming back again soon. And mostly we are getting a number of animals that are just passing through. So some that are just seen maybe for a few days or even just a single day that we don't see again. But we are also getting animals that are hanging around, like ivy, minstrel, and pie, for example, arriving in around December and staying until about February. So we have got strong seasonality in the timing of the sightings that we are getting, but we are getting sightings throughout the year as well. So it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility that we'll get to see sightings of these animals during the summer as well. Next slide, one back. So we at the Southwest UK Whale Catalogue, we're formalising. We're actually getting there at last. So up until relatively recently, it's largely been down to myself running this, but I've recruited Bex and Brian and Tash Murch, who's another C+ volunteer officially, to join me and help manage the project as it's becoming bigger and more time consuming to run, especially last year with all the Surfrider stuff going on. So we're doing a lot of work in the background to get ourselves properly in gear, working towards having a fully functioning project. So we're formalising the catalogue with full processes for data collection and different levels of photo permissions from contributors. We have a project page in development with the Cornwall Wildlife Trust website that will be appearing soon. And we're creating a shareable standardised catalogue for use with project partners and for the public as well to see the animals that we have in our catalogue. Brian's been hard at work creating the Happy Whale online a profile on the Happy Whale online platform, and we've been having engagement with the university directors to over various master student projects, 2 of which are now underway. Next slide, then, Bex. So how can we help us? We can report wildlife, all species, to Cornwall Wildlife Trust via their website or on the Orcs app, which is fantastic. I use it and it's completely straightforward. And you can report absolutely anything. You can become a C+ Southwest volunteer as well. And then, oh dear, looks like the slides messed up a little bit here. Sorry, that might be formatting, but there's 4 photo ID projects that you can contribute to. There's the bottlenose dolphin one. That Duncan mentioned earlier, Josh and the Risso's dolphins. We have Sarah from the Dolphin Zone talking a little bit later about common dolphin identification, which is new and fantastic. And then, of course, ourselves that whale ID project as well. And then, last slide, please, Bex. I've got one. Otherwise, ways that you can help the animals are if you see live marine mammals and turtles in distress. There's the hotline number for British Divers Marine Life Rescue. Reporting deceased marine animals of any species. There's the Marine Strandings Network as well. And then you can follow best practice marine wildlife watching codes of conduct, which you can readily find available on the internet at Cornwall Marine Coastal Code Group and the DEFRA Marine Coastal Wildlife Code. And there's also the Wildlife Safe Scheme Training Certification as well. In terms of best practice occasion watching, it's things like keeping 100 meters distance unless they approach you on their terms. reduce gradually to a low wake speed and maintain course with those sudden turns. Don't approach head on from behind or cut across their path of travel, and avoid driving through pods or feeding groups as well, and from boxing animals in between craft and against the coast, and you can allow room for them to leave and don't follow them when they do. So last slide then, Beck. I'd just like to thank everybody who's contributed so far to the project. We're still relatively young and we're still getting to grips with everything, but we're having some great support from people largely around from the southwest, which is fantastic. We're also getting more outreach, such as Ted Cheeseman at Happy Whale, Fred Wenzel of North Atlantic Humpback Whale Catalogue, and others as well. So hopefully, as time goes on, we'll get a little bit better at what we're doing and have even more data to learn from you. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Dan and Briar. That was great. Lovely to get updates on our humpbacks. And it was 2025 was really a spectacular year, especially with Surfrider just hanging out and Pi hanging out in Scillies and Surfrider hanging out in Yuki Bay. I was very spoilt having one in my hometown. That was great. Okay, I think I'm just going to slightly tweak the order because I hope